You are Locked On Sun Devils, your daily podcast on the Arizona State Sun Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The regular season is over, at least, but let's see what happens moving forward. I'm not so sure that Bobby Hurley won't be back next season. Hey, everyone, this is Richie Bradshaw, host of the Locked On Sun Devils podcast and part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you all so much for tuning in to this live edition of Locked On Sun Devils. Don't worry if you miss this live, you join late, whatever. It is all archived. You can find this later on YouTube. You can also find this wherever you get your shows in an audio form. We go live every weekend, kind of back and forth between Saturdays and Sundays right now. This is our first Sunday one in a little bit. Let's see how it goes. And moving forward, we'll talk about that. But what a year, man. Just what a year. I want to know what you guys think. So drop a comment for how you feel this season went. I want to talk about how I feel the season went, because disaster, dreadful, horrible, no good, very bad. I feel like all of those are almost like understatements for how the season went. Now, I do want to address the fact that Bobby Hurley was dealt a very rough hand this year in the injury department. And that's difficult for any coach to overcome, whether you're the greatest coach in the history of sports or you are the worst coach in the history of sports. When you are dealt the amount of injuries that ASU had to overcome this year, it's just a very difficult situation to be able to move past. And it doesn't matter how great this roster was. And if we're being honest, it was a great roster. The roster was not the issue this season. The injuries, the drama that unfolded, and just falling short throughout games. Like, they couldn't close games. They couldn't find ways to stay within tight games when it got late down the stretch. Like, these were just some games that ASU needed to find a way to win. They weren't able to win them. They ended up going 4-12 in conference play, and it was just hard, man. This was a very difficult season to watch, and there's a lot of questions about whether or not Bobby Hurley should return in 2025. Now, this is something I have previously talked about on Locked On Sun Devils, so if you have missed that episode, go ahead and check that one out and see my opinions, because I was quite passionate when I said that it's probably time to move on from Hurley. I've also mentioned it on the Big 12 squad with Drake Toll and everybody else. So there's a lot of places, sorry, kicking my microphone there. There's a lot of places where I have addressed this topic and this conversation. And it's something that we're going to continue to talk about, because this is the future of a program that has never been good, if we're being honest, but there's no reason for them to be as bad as they have been. I've said many a times, the expectations with ASU basketball on an annual basis should be to go to the tournament. Not win a game, not win a championship. More often than not, ASU should be going to the NCAA tournament. And in the Bobby Hurley tenure, they have made 3 appearances in the first 4 out. They are 2-1 in those. So they have 2 appearances in the round of 64. They're 0-2. Now, the season that was canceled due to COVID-19, that was a good team, and I think that they were going to have themselves a very good opportunity to make some noise in the tournament. I feel like that was one of the teams that Bobby Hurley assembled that had the most potential, and they had played up to that potential, but they weren't able to get there. So instead, in 10 seasons, we go to the tournament 3 times, 2-1 in the first 4 out, and then 0-2 in the round of 64. That's not going to do it. Even for Arizona State, where the expectations are pretty dang low when it comes to the basketball team, that's just not going to do it. And it's just been this routine, continual struggle with Bobby Hurley at the helm. He's been here 10 years and 3 appearances, man. No wins. Like, as far as I'm concerned, Bobby Hurley is 0-3 in the tournament. Like, the first 4 out, my opinion, I just don't really count it. I really don't. But that's just subjective, I suppose. There are so many things that just are not going right with this program in the Bobby Hurley era. One of the things that has been going well is the recruiting. He's got like 17 or 18 of the 25 highest rated recruits in the history of the basketball program since they started tracking that stuff. And yet they do nothing with it. And it's a coaching problem. It's a culture problem. It's an NIL problem. Like, there's so many things that have contributed to the constant unsuccess, I guess, the constant failures. How about that? The constant failures that we have seen under Bobby Hurley. And it's just endless, man. And you go into this season, and this was supposed to be a clean slate. You're leaving the Pac-12, you're going to the Big 12. At the time, the conference for college basketball. You had Houston, you had Kansas, you had Arizona, you had sneaky good programs like K-State, and Baylor has had very successful seasons. Obviously, Texas Tech turned into a very good team. Iowa State ended up being a really good team this year. Like, this is still a dynamic conference. Now, they got overshadowed by the SEC, which, shocker, the SEC overshadowed something in sports. What's new? But this was your chance to rewrite your script as a basketball program. Clean slate in arguably the best conference in college basketball. And saying they fell short is just a dramatic understatement. Like, this was a pitiful season, and so much of it falls on Bobby Hurley. And again, like I started off this conversation, I do understand, I really do, that the injuries mounted up so significantly this season that not a lot of guys would be able to overcome that stuff because they lost so much of their bench. And then their starters are missing games throughout the year. And one of the guys is flat out removed from the team. We'll talk about that a little bit. But this was just a nightmare season. I'd said that previously, and it feels like the nightmare has only gotten worse. Like, this is a season out of hell, man. Like, this was not what anyone thought. I truly don't know if there were any Sun Devil fans that anticipated the team would be this bad. Something I'm going to talk about on tomorrow's show is why this season was the worst season in program history. And I got news for you. There was a lot of seasons with worse winning percentages, with worse or less wins than what ASU had. And I would still say this is the worst season that the program has ever seen. We'll talk about it more tomorrow. So, make sure to tune in and have your notifications on when that episode drops. Just a frustrating season, man. I don't think any Sun Devil fan was going into this year anticipating that the program was going to be this bad. It never should have been. One of the greatest recruiting classes ever, which included 2 of the 3 highest recruits in program history, with number 1 Jaden Quaintance coming in. You had another top 100 prospect. You had this elite transfer class that had 2 4-star transfers and 2 former 4-star recruits out of high school, which included Austin Nunez, who started his collegiate journey in Arizona State, goes to Ole Miss for a year, hates it, decides to come back. He was definitely going to have a role for this team this year, but he wasn't able to get on the court due to injuries. And that was just the narrative all season long. And now at the end of the year, we lose Jaden Quaintance. I doubt that he's going to play in the Big 12 tournament against Kansas State. I just don't foresee any way that Quaintance could or should come back at this point. Like, there's nothing to play for him. He has to play 2 years of college basketball regardless. So why risk setting yourself back even further and re-aggravating an injury when you can just call it quits and say, I had a good freshman year. I was averaging almost 10 points a game. I set ASU's blocks record as a rookie or as a freshman. You know what I meant. It was a incredibly successful season for Jaden Quaintance. So there's no point in trying to force that season to be better, I guess, when there's a much higher chance that you just end up really, really setting yourself back. It's just a bummer, man. And then some of your best players on the year, Josan Sannon is the first guy who comes to mind for me, was just so hot and cold. Guess what? Because of injuries. Sannon misses 5 games, essentially 6 games, because of a foot injury, and he takes almost 2 months to get back to form. Like, he just did not look like himself when he got back out there. Now, the last few games, he looks like himself, and he looks like the Josan Sannon that we were promised was going to be coming to this program. And it was phenomenal. It was so much fun to see him clicking, and it was fun to see Jaden Quaintance clicking, and it was fun to see Amir Ali over the last month just take off into his role too. But it's I wouldn't say all for naught, but it does feel like you wasted those seasons from them. And you definitely wasted a really good transfer class. Bashir Jihad and Alston Mason, phenomenal ads. By the way, Jihad was the only player who played in all 31 games this year, and there's no reason for him to miss the 32nd game against Kansas State. I don't know about you guys. I do not anticipate to win that game. It's not even that like K-State is this elite team. It's just that's how bad ASU is. I do not think we're going to win that game. I just don't see any scenario where that happens. So Jihad's the only guy who's played in everything. Now, Mason would have played in everything, but he was sick for one of those games. And for Mason to miss a game because he was sick, I mean, I can only imagine how bad that had looked for him. Not fun at all. This a wasted season, man. Let's bring it to where I want to focus the remainder of this show now. And that is Bobby Hurley. We've talked about how this season went. We talked about how the expectations fell short and this opportunity for a clean slate did not come to be. This is all going to be talked about in much more detail tomorrow as well. I know I mentioned that already, but for those of you who are just joining in, first of all, thank you guys so much. Feel free to leave a comment. That's the best part about these lives is we're going to have good conversation while we're here. We're going to talk about it more tomorrow. I want to focus on Bobby Hurley for the remainder of this live. So let's go ahead and get started. With Bobby Hurley, you've got someone who is one of the longest tenured coaches in program history. This is the 10th season that he is completing. He has very much underachieved, though. And it's despite the fact that he is one of the best recruiters that the program has ever seen, if not the best recruiter. In fact, I don't know if there's another coach from this program, head coach, assistant coach, whatever, that has recruited at the rate that Bobby Hurley does. And now stuff is starting to pool in too. Like you're seeing NIL is slowly catching up. He has that docuseries that comes out. Josan Sannon had a endorsement deal, and I know some of that went to the NIL. Now you've got James Harden, who is pouring in 6 figures for NIL donations. And he recently said that if that's the problem, then I will be one of the guys who helps to fix the problem. Like you're seeing the money start to be invested. And now you see that, oh my goodness, the athletic director, Graham Rossini, is saying, hey, we're going to start renovating Desert Financial Arena, which long overdue. That thing needed to be fixed forever ago. I have said it just needed to be demolished, but we'll do what we got to do to get that thing up and running. This has just been so underwhelming. So underwhelming. And Bobby Hurley's had some bad seasons. Heck, the season before this one was pretty bad. You had Jose Perez, who I don't think he's going to be remembered fondly by Sun Devil fans. Adam Miller came on late in the year. Oh God, who else was on that team? I'd have to look. I can't think off the top of my head. They just assembled a lot of transfers again, and it was fine. Frankie Collins was still here. Man, I wish he had stayed, man. I'm so curious how different this team would have played if he had stayed. And of course, if you promise me that he doesn't get injured, because that's what happens at TCU, he gets injured and then he's not able to finish out the year. Like, if you tell me that Frankie Collins is one of the guys who can maintain his health and stay at Arizona State, there is a question that I have as to whether or not ASU wins a few more games. He was that big of a difference maker for ASU. And it was still just a really bad season in 2023-24. And it just got so much worse this year, despite the fact that this was just a 10 times more talented team. That's the part that just kills me the most, man. And that's the thing that I will look back on this season and I will say there was no reason they shouldn't have been better than what they were. I understand the injuries, and it's hard to overlook the injuries. I've said that multiple times now on this live. But you know what? At some point, you just need to be able to overcome those situations, play good, better basketball, and move on from there. And that was not something that ASU was able to do this year. I think it's a huge coaching problem right now, and Bobby Hurley is just not able to get the most out of these guys. It happens. It does, but that doesn't excuse what is going on with this team. They've got to figure it out, man. Is Bobby going to be back next year? It's an interesting question. Not long ago on the show, I had said, hey, kind of touch and go. We'll see. Not much later than that, I had another show. I said, yeah, it's time to move on. Not much longer after that, I sat down with Drake Toll from Locked On Big 12. And I doubled down and said, yeah, it's time to move on from Bobby Hurley. And I sit here with you today, March 9th, 2025. One more game remaining, unless the Sun Devils go on some insane run for the Big 12 tournament. There's one game left. I sit here and I tell you, yeah, it's probably time to move on from Hurley. I'm not backing down off of that. However, I continue to have the thought process that I've previously had, and that's if you move on from Hurley, this is a brand new team. This is ground zero for the team. There's nothing that's going to be back. You are going to lose Jaden Quaintance, Amir Ali, Josan Sanin, Trevor Best. I just don't see a scenario where they return. I assume Austin Nunez might book it because he came back for Bobby Hurley. You're losing Alston Mason, Bashir Jihad, and Adam Miller because of eligibility. BJ Freeman got kicked off the team. Sean Phillips, he might depart as well. This might be a just flat out completely different team. And that's not always a bad thing. There are times where just a restart is exactly what a program needs. And that might be what ASU needs. But how disappointing would it be to look at what they brought in this offseason, have it for 1 year, and you didn't do anything with it? In fact, you did so much worse with it than you ever possibly could have. It's almost embarrassing what was going on for ASU this season. When we're looking at the talent of the team, when we're looking at the expectations that we place on this team, when we're looking at how everything should have been coming together with a new slate in a brand new conference. And it just feels like everything was supposed to work out for the better for ASU, and it just simply did not. And so much of it falls on Bobby Hurley's shoulders. So yeah, I am still pretty much in the room that Bobby Hurley needs to be fired and move on. But again, this is such an important thing to talk about, guys, is you are completely restarting this program. You are losing some of the best, highest rated recruits that you've ever gotten. It is a complete rebuild. This is also a program that I don't know how many guys are dying to come here. I've seen some hints and rumors about guys, but I just don't know if this is a program that is going to be attractive enough for for somebody that we can trust to turn this program around. We'll see. I do think there is a very, very realistic chance that Bobby Hurley is back, though. And it's not because of what am I trying to say? It's not. Let's start over. I think that there is a very realistic possibility that Bobby Hurley is back next year. This would be in spite of a dreadful season that was marred with injuries and an insane amount of drama. What a year for drama, man. I felt like I was back in high school dealing with all sorts of stuff. Guys headbutting players, multiple suspensions, everyone's injured, everyone's frustrated. It was Bobby Hurley getting a tech a game, which that's always been a thing, but God, it felt so much worse this year. It was just one of those seasons, man, and everything culminated together. But one of the biggest reasons that I believe we could see Bobby Hurley return is right now, ASU is still really figuring out their vision under Graham Rossini. And I feel like that has extended the leash for several coaches. Now, the women's basketball coach just got canned. That probably should have happened a while ago. But we have Kenny Dillingham, who is coming off a 3-win season and has this insane success. But I'll tell you, like, I think Kenny could have had 2 more consecutive 3-win seasons, and his job would not have been in jeopardy because it was a fresh start with the athletic director. Willie Bloomquist, the baseball head coach. First of all, they are taking off this year. That is something that we should start paying attention to a little bit more, and something that I definitely want to talk on the podcast about. So if you're a baseball fan, stay tuned. I will see what I can do to talk about some baseball a little bit. But he was on a short leash going into this year, and he's having good success to start the year. Now they could fall apart in the second half of the year. That's kind of what we've seen from our teams recently. But I do think that no matter how the season ends, unless it is drastically bad, like unless they just fall off the face of the earth and become one of the worst baseball programs in the country, I don't see a scenario where Bloomquist is fired, even with a losing season. It's just, I don't know, man. I don't know that, getting back to Bobby Hurley, that he is definitively going to be fired. Again, Graham Rossini just fired the women's basketball coach. It's not like he's unwilling to move on from people, but he's also given his verbal support to Bobby Hurley previously. And that could always just be talk. People put that stuff out all the time. This is our coach, blah, blah, blah. And then a week later, they fire the guy. Like, it's just a part of the politics of talking with the media with sports. It's a thing. However, at the time, I thought that there was a lot more truth and a lot more support when Rossini had talked about Bobby Hurley than if he was just kind of playing face. Like, there's times where you're like, I know you don't mean that. I feel like you could have gone 50-50 with what Rossini had said about Bobby Hurley. There's a part of you that's like, there's no way he means that, right? But then you sit back and you look at the way that he talks about him and everything, and it's like, oh, I don't know, maybe there is something there. Maybe there is a little bit of support that he's going to receive from Graham Rossini. He's also only got 1 more year on his contract, so you could just let him play it out. Speaking of payout, though, I don't know if ASU is in a situation where they can pay out Bobby Hurley's buyout. I don't think it's anything crazy. I want to say it's only like $4 million. Don't quote me. It could be more than that. But I don't know that ASU is in a position to pay out the buyout right now because they are still getting a lot of resources reestablished. Like, this was a university that had all the talent in the world and all the resources in the world to have very good athletics, just across the board: basketball, football, baseball, volleyball, swim and dive, golf, wrestling, all of it. And they've just continually fallen short of that. It's starting to pick up a little bit. You've got your NIL collective, you've got boosters getting back in, but I still don't know that ASU is ready to be able to fork off millions of dollars, to shell off millions of dollars, to part ways with millions of dollars from Bobby Hurley. I don't know that they're there. There's also the fact that, like I said, you move on from Hurley. This is a complete rebuild. I don't know if a single player on this roster returns. There's a lot of seniors. There's a lot of youngsters that could move on. I just don't foresee a scenario where ASU has this insane amount of return from what we are seeing now. That might not be a bad thing. I know there's a lot of people that are ready for the reset and people that have been ready for the reset for years. And that is completely valid. And I don't necessarily disagree with you. But God, it would suck to lose this class, man. I don't want to lose Quaintance. I don't want to lose Sandin. I don't want to lose Ali. I don't want to lose Sean Phillips and Trevor Best and anybody else who can return to this team, because in a perfect world where everybody is healthy and everyone develops a little bit, that core right there, those guys starting, that is a tournament team. At least your top five. You got to build your bench. You got to hope that the injuries stay out of the way, and you got to hope that whatever recruiting class you have coming up is able to step up. Koa Pete is still out there, but I don't know if this was the season to reel him in. Maybe, I don't know, but I just feel like you could get me there for one more season with Hurley. But I'm not going to lie, it has nothing to do with Hurley. It has everything to do with the core of this team. Something that I've talked about on the show before. One of the biggest problems that I have with this basketball program, and one of the biggest reasons that I believe it's so hard to get people invested on an annual basis, is it's a brand new team every year. They have not had consistency on a year-to-year basis since like Remy Martin and Kamani Lawrence were the guys running the court. Like every year has just been a completely different team. You had your what's it called? The team from the COVID season that was really good, but then a lot of them were gone, including Remy Martin, who goes on to win a natty with Kansas. And then you have a year where you have Desmond Cambridge and Devin Cambridge and Warren Washington and Frankie Collins come in. And then three of them are gone. And Frankie Collins returns. And then you bring in Jose Perez, and you bring in Adam Miller, and you bring in Sean Phillips. And then Frankie Collins transfers, and some of the other seniors that were on the team are gone. And okay, well now Adam Miller and Sean Phillips are returning. And you bring in this recruiting class, and you could lose all of them. That sucks, man. How do you get fans to be invested in a program where they are unable to have a favorite player? There are no Cody Justices out there. There are no Trey Holders out there. There's no Remy Martin. There's no, not so much the caliber of player, but like there's no James Harden. There's no guys to get invested in right now. That could change this year. That could change. We go into next year, everyone knows who Jaden Quaintance is. The nation knows who Jaden Quaintance is. That's conversation worthy. That gets fans to go to the games. They're like, I want to see Jaden Quaintance. He has the potential to be a star at the next level in the NBA. I want to see Josan Sandin. He decided to return. I do think that there's a very, very, very good chance he returns. I don't know if he's drafted right now. He is someone that has previously said, I'm going to be one and done, but then this season didn't go the way that he was hoping to. I think it would benefit him a lot to return for another year, whether that's at ASU or somewhere else, to get healthy, develop, and show his future employers, like, yeah, I am a next level player. But if he's back at ASU, yeah, I want to go see Josan Sandin. I want to see Jaden Quaintance. And then you start watching some more games, and you're like, oh, Amir Ali's been here a minute. Trevor Best has been here a minute. Oh, is this Sean Phillips' third year? Yeah, I'm a big Sean Phillips fan. It gets fans to buy in to a team that is lacking anyone buying in. That to me is the biggest reason that Bobby Hurley could return next year. And I'm not saying it's the right thing to do. Me personally, that's the only reason I am bringing back Bobby Hurley. And I am borderline in support of it because I am that desperate to have players to root for, players to cheer for, players to get invested in. At least you have these guys for 2 years. If Hurley returns, maybe more. Who knows? Maybe Quaintance and Sandin and Ali and Trevor Best are all able to play out the entirety of their collegiate careers at ASU. There is that possibility if they return for another year that they can continue to be here. But at least you've got someone to invest in going into next year, coming off a pitiful season. Tell me this. They fire Bobby Hurley. This entire roster is gone, coming off of one of the worst seasons in program history. Are you getting invested? I don't know. I feel like that'd be as hard to sell as you could possibly find. Let me drop a comment if you guys have an opinion. I will be getting to them shortly. I have just been yapping a lot, obviously. But I do see you guys in there. Locked on K-State. Me and Christian are going to be having a crossover episode that will drop on Tuesday. Make sure you're here for that. Ryan, good to see you. Sean, good to see you. As always, anybody else, I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Leave a comment if you want me to address what you have to say. All that good stuff. But we are going to be wrapping up here. I just don't know how you sell ASU basketball to fans next year with a blank slate. Like, unless Coach K comes out of retirement to join Arizona State and say, like, oh, I'm going to prove that I'm the greatest coach of all time and I'm going to rebuild Arizona State. Like, unless you have some kind of monumental coaching hire like that, I don't know that there's another guy in the country that would really get these fans reintegrated and reinvested into a program that just continues to underwhelm and is now coming off just a dreadful season, a beyond frustrating season. This is one of the worst seasons that the program has had in the last 10 years, in the last 15, 20, 25 years, since the turn of the century. This has been one of the worst years ever. And again, I am going to talk about that more tomorrow on the show. So make sure you have your notifications turned on for when that show drops, because I think this was the worst season ever in the history of the program. Talk about why tomorrow, though. How do you get fans reinvested in a program that is going to be ground zero? New head coach, completely new roster. You better hope that you can land some kind of premier transfer. I don't know who's going to be in the transfer portal. And I don't know if anyone is going to be interested in coming to Arizona State. You might have 5 Richie Bradshaws on the court. Who's going to come watch that? You're not going to win a lot of games, more than likely. And you're certainly going to start the year with Desert Financial being a away situation for ASU. They're not going to have these home games and a home court advantage, which they did not have that this year. Not going to get better this year. I don't know. All right, let's go through your guys' comments as we wrap this up. Sean Benitez says, I like Bobby Hurley, but it's time to move on. But who out there is better or available? And then followed it up with, and our big name coach is willing to come to ASU with no real basketball history of success. Exactly. That's the whole thing. It is time to move on from Bobby Hurley. I don't know if you can debate at this point if it is or if it isn't time. He's had a decade. He's had 10 years to get this program turned around, and he has not been able to do it. I don't think there's any way at this point in time that you can sit here and definitively say, oh, come on, you got to give him 1 more year. You got to give him 2 more years. No, he's had all the time in the world. It is time to move on. But you have that problem. Who wants to come to this program? The NIL is still behind. It's growing, sure. It is still behind. You're going to lose everyone on this team. I would almost guarantee not a single player would return off of this current Arizona State roster if Bobby Hurley is gone. And guys are going to leave anyway, for sure. You're not guaranteed to bring back Quaintance and Sandin and stuff like that, but your chances of doing it are drastically higher if he does return. It's just hard to get people invested in a team that is going to be brand spanking new. And not for the better. Not for the better. Locked on K-State, like I said, me and Christian are going to have a crossover episode on Tuesday discussing ASU's matchup with the Wildcats in the Big 12 tournament. He's saying we're going to catch an L on Tuesday. I don't disagree, but, make sure you give him hell. Check out Locked on Kansas State. Give him some love and give him some hell for me. And then Ryan Hasty, as we wrap up here, why bring back Bobby? ASU has been cheeks. I agree. ASU has been one of the laughing stocks of college basketball in a Division I since, they have been one of the worst programs in the country. Yeah, they've been to the tournament 3 times, technically, in 10 years. They have a losing record in conference play, and it's not close. It's well under that 500 mark. They are not a team that has had any kind of routine annual success, and certainly not a team that people look at on their schedule and they go, we better get ready for Arizona State. That's going to be a tough game. No one sees ASU that way. No one. So this is quite the predicament that ASU is in right now. And all signs should point to Bobby Hurley getting fired. But I don't think that's going to be the case. And I think that we are going to see Bobby Hurley stick around. That's something that we'll be paying close attention to on the show. So if you have not hit subscribe, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. If that's Apple Music or Spotify or Amazon, we are free and available on all platforms. If you missed this live or any other previous lives, don't worry. They're all archived. You can check them out on YouTube. They are in a specific, what's it called? A specific folder, I think. Playlist. They're in a specific playlist that you can check all of them out from previously. These also go up on all your audio platforms, so you can check these out whenever. Do not worry. And of course, we'll be back tomorrow. We got a lot to talk about here on Locked On Sun Devils when it comes to this basketball team as the season essentially closes. And I will see you guys next time. Thank you, as always, for tuning in to the live. Bring in some love, drop in some comments. I will see you all next time. And until then, you keep it locked right here on Locked On Sun.